Good evening and welcome to live event number 2, our PM edition for HIM 201. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. We're going to be looking at several different things that have to do with tying up the rest of our class as we are now at the end of week 8. So just a little bit of a refresh on what we spoke about in the AM edition. That one focused on putting together a plan for success, what it is that you need to do to make sure that you finish strong. If there are things that you need to complete that maybe are still outstanding, if there's things that you want to go back and maybe resubmit for mastery, those types of things. But we're going to kind of continue along in that same path. We're going to be making our way looking forward at the final exam. So again, just a reminder, as we looked at this morning, our week 8 through 10 objectives. So to continue the chapter mastery and then also prepare for the final exam. So we have, of course, in week 8, we're looking at urogenital system, pregnancy, childbirth, and the perineum, and then we have, of course, going into chapter 9, our congenital malformations, deformations, and chromosomal. So again, those are going to be tied to different discussion questions. And then week 10 is really about wrapping things up and that final assessment. But there's a few things about that final assessment that I want to kind of point out so that you can be expecting, how to prepare, again, best, plan for your best success. So we have on here, I've highlighted just a few of the nuances with this final exam. So you can see on here that there is a time limit. It's 180 minutes. And multiple attempts, no. This is a single attempt final exam. So the reason I stress that is that I want to make sure that when you sit down to work on this, that you have the time set aside, that you don't have distractions, that you maybe, if there is a storm coming through the area, that may not be the best time to do that, because are you sure you're going to be able to hold on to your internet, say, for 3 hours? Do you have maybe children at home and someone is down for a nap? Are they going to sleep for 3 hours? Because again, if you are disrupted in the middle of your exam, you can't stop and restart it. So again, just stressing the point, then when you sit down to do your final exam, make sure that you have focus time, focus space, focus internet. So as you get to looking at that, we want to also look at what types of things should you expect to see on the final exam. I know that in the past I've had students that just wanted to check out what is the content, and unfortunately when they did that look-see, that actually utilized their single attempt. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through a little bit. What are some of the things that you can expect to see on the final exam? So here we have, let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'll let you read for just a moment and then we'll pick up again. What you can expect is a mix of multiple choice, true, false, and of course short answer questions, right? So it's going to offer you different things where maybe you have to enter the code or you have to enter a term as opposed to giving you multiple choice. But I do have to tell you, I think a lot of these really do kind of lean towards multiple choice. So some of the things that you can expect on this exam, so some of the things that you're going to want to feel confident about, right? And this is actually something we talked about in our week 1 live event, and that was identifying the main term, right? That was one of those core things that we looked at is whenever you have a diagnostic statement, you have a complex scenario, what you really have to narrow it down to is, wait a second, what is that main term? Where am I going to start? Because then that will guide you to the alpha. Okay, so what might be an example of a question where they're asking you to identify the main term, or they're asking you to identify what term you're going to use if you go to the alpha index, right? Which means that you have to have already identified the main term to know that. So here's an example. So for the statement, intestinal obstruction due to meconium and mucoviscidosis, of newborn, the main term to reference in the index is. So as you start off with this, you're going to want to think about, okay, what is the main term out of the statement that I was just given? Now I'm going to go to my alpha and I'm going to break it down and I'm going to find out what is now this main term that you're going to reference in the index. Okay, so first of all, figure it out from the diagnostic statement, then go ahead to your alpha and figure out what does it actually say there. So in this one, for example, the options would be, is it intestinal or obstruction? Is it obstruction or meconium? Obstruction or mucoviscidosis, that is a mouthful. Or is it mucoviscidosis, meconium, or obstruction? So what is it that you're going to look at? So again, look at the statement, identify where's that main term, what is my starter something that I'm going to consider as I go into the alpha section. And what do you find? Well, in this one specifically, it is the the one I can't say, of course, mucoviscidosis, meconium, or obstruction. So that's going to be that thing that you're going to reference in that alphabetical index. Okay, so just being able to, again, when you get that statement, don't be overwhelmed by it, but identify the main term. And then it's not necessarily that main term, but they're wanting to know in the index, what is it going to say? So you go find it, okay? How would you code that? Where would you even start in the alpha index? Okay, so another type that you would see would be identify the principal diagnosis. So again, it's going to give you a scenario. It's going to give you a diagnostic statement. And you need to identify what is the principal diagnosis. So here's an example. A patient is admitted with nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. Testing has revealed colitis. The principal diagnosis is what? Are you going to select nausea and vomiting, abdominal pain, colitis, or diarrhea? So within this one, you're going to go with colitis. And the reason for that is it's actually a confirmed diagnosis, right? So you don't even have to think about, well, is it inpatient? Is it office? No, you know what? This is a confirmed diagnosis. You can go ahead. You're going to have a principal diagnosis of colitis. Now, had you not found colitis, if you had had suspected colitis, you could still code it because you're testing for it and whatnot. If you had just done a bunch of tests, you didn't even suspect something, which would be highly unlikely if you're running a lot of tests, you would at that point likely do the symptoms. But again, you have a confirmed diagnosis. The testing, the diagnostics have revealed that it's colitis. You've done all this testing to identify the colitis. Therefore, your principal diagnosis is colitis. Okay, so other things that you're going to see in the final exam are going to be things related to coding conventions and instructional notes, right? This has been something that we have focused on a lot when it comes to our discussion questions. So week over week, we have a chapter focus. We go into that chapter and we identify, whether it's instructional notes or special coding guidelines. We create scenarios, and then we tell what are those coding guidelines or those coding conventions or whatever it is that goes with that scenario, and then we code it. So we have been doing this week over week. So how about this statement? Which of the following diagnoses would not be reported with code G47.13? So as you look at that, one of the best ways to do this, right, would be to open your code book, go to G47.13, and look for what is included within that, what should not be coded with that, right? There's going to be different instructions. There's going to be things that are not included. So in this specific scenario, it's actually going to be idiopathic hypersomnia. Now, why would it be that? Well, because of the meaning of G47.13, that is not idiopathic. It's already identified a reason. So therefore, you would not say unknown reason for hypersomnia when you've already identified the reason with those others. Okay, so in that case, it would not be included. Okay, so how about checking out inpatient versus outpatient coding? Because as we talked about as well in our, live event number 1, there is a difference between coding inpatient and outpatient. And we've seen this time over time as we've gone through our MindTap activities. So there's certain things that you code and there's certain things that you don't code. So let's look at this one, office note. Sally has been experiencing right upper quadrant pain for the last 3 months. After extensive testing, gallbladder disease and gallstones have been ruled out. The clinical assessment is spasm of the sphincter of Oddi. The codes to report for this case are what? So you're going to want to look up the codes. What are the different codes that they are presenting you with? Even before going to the codes, kind of look at this and determine what are you going to code, right? So you can see this, well, let me see. Sally's been experiencing right upper quadrant pain for the last 3 months. Are you going to code right upper quadrant pain? You would if you didn't have a confirmed diagnosis. Okay, because again, it's an office note, so you would code the symptoms. You don't code suspected. Okay, so even on this one, it says after extensive testing, gallbladder disease and gallstones have been ruled out. So you're definitely not going to code that one. It's been ruled out. The clinical assessment is spasm of the sphincter of Oddi. So now you have like, okay, so we've done the testing, so they've come in with symptoms, we've ruled out certain diagnosis, and now we have an actual diagnosis, right? So how are we going to code this? Well, if we look at that K83.4, the first one that's offered here, bullet point K83.4 and R10.11, well, what are those? So K83.4, sounds good to me, spasm of sphincter of Oddi, which right here we can see that this is a winner, right? Because, what's this, trying to get to highlight. Okay, we can see that that's a winner because that's a confirmed diagnosis because of the assessment, right? Okay. What about that R10.11? So that one is the right upper quadrant pain. Like I said, we're not going to code that one because it's an office visit. The right upper quadrant pain is just a symptom of that spasm of the sphincter of Oddi. So you're not going to code something that would already be included in it, okay? So if someone has spasm of sphincter of Oddi, right upper quadrant pain is expected. It's not going to be coded separately. Okay, so if you look down below, here we have again that R10.11. So we already kind of know that that's not going to be a winner because why would we code the symptom? But then they're also offering K80.30. So what about this one? Well, K80.30 is basically gallstones. Okay, so it's calculus of bile duct with cholangitis, right? So you're looking at inflammation and gallstones and whatnot. Well, we've already said that that was ruled out. So we're not going to code the right upper quadrant pain, nor are we going to code the ruled out diagnosis. Okay, what about K82.9? This one again, disease of the gallbladder unspecified. So we don't really have a disease of the gallbladder unspecified because again, we have a diagnosis in the spasm of the sphincter of Oddi. And then again, we have that K80.30, which these two would seem to be a little bit not supporting each other, right? Because you have K82.9, which is disease of gallbladder unspecified, and then you have K80, which is saying gallstones. 80.30, sorry. And then finally we have, this is like a mouthful, we have K83.4. So what about this one? This one is stating just like where we started out here in this first one, this is the spasm of the sphincter of Oddi. This is actually our winning diagnosis, right? Because we're not coding right upper quadrant pain. We're not coding the ruled out gallbladder diseases. We are just coding the spasm of the sphincter of Oddi. That took a while to get there, but you can see how you can kind of go through it in a couple different ways. First of all, decide what it is you're going to code, and then you can rule out the different options that they're giving you as validation that you selected the correct thing. Okay, what about coding via diagnostic statement? So this is something else that you can expect on the final exam. So an example of this would be Mr. Smith was admitted to Sunny Valley Rest Home with a pressure ulcer of the sacral region with full thickness skin loss with damage of the subcutaneous tissue extending to the underlying fascia. This would be reported with which code? Okay, so keep in mind that a lot of times when they put these questions together, they'll say which code and then parentheses with an S as though there could be multiple. Don't be thrown by that. That's why it's so important for you to determine initially what would you code before you go into the questions. Because sometimes when it's multiple choice, you can get a little bit sideways. Go with your gut. What would you code in looking at this statement? Now, validate yourself. Okay, so on this one, we say, okay, so L89.149. So let's assume that you've already looked in your code book, you already know what you're going to code, but now you want to just kind of like rule these out, right? You're double checking yourself. So L89.149, and as you can see, I've actually listed it twice here, so my bad. Okay, so this is a pressure ulcer, left lower back, unspecified stage. Is this truly an unspecified stage, and is this the most accurate description of where this is located? Right, so we know where this, I can't really point to it, but the sacral region is, and it is kind of left lower back, but it's actually lower than that, right? So is there something more specific? Well, let's go to L89.153. What is that one? Well, that one's more specific. That one says pressure ulcer, sacral region, stage 3. So now we need to double check, okay, when we look at that damage, how do we look at our staging, right? Let's get some more detail around the staging. Is this a stage 3? Likewise, if we look at L89.159, that one is basically the same as L89.153, but it doesn't offer a staging. That one says unspecified stage. So if you've gone to your book and you've confirmed, yes, as described, that full thickness skin loss with damage of the subcutaneous tissue extending to the underlying fascia, that equates to stage 3. Well, then we already know right there. This one is L89.153. And that, again, is that pressure ulcer, sacral region, stage 3. So again, read the diagnostic statement, determine what it is that you want to actually use, and then rule out the other ones. Okay. And then finally, there's going to be questions. Of course, we love true and false, right? But there's going to be questions that are about disease state or even anatomy, things like that in the body. So for example, the semicircular canals are 3 bony structures that are filled with fluid that help to maintain balance. True or false? So how well do you know your anatomy? Thinking about where these are located, the semicircular canals, this one is actually true. Okay, so those are those things that help you maintain balance. I don't know about you, but I suffer a little bit. Perhaps with the fluid, I don't know. Allergy season, and it goes straight to my ears. Okay, how about leukemia is a malignant type of neoplasm? Is that true or false? So again, this is drawing from what has been your knowledge as we worked through the different chapters, the different focus areas. Was your knowledge of leukemia? Is this a true statement or a false statement? Well, you should know if you've been through this chapter already, this is a true statement. So you can see the types of questions that you can be expecting, the types of formats, things like that in which they'll be answered. So that is it. I just wanted to give you a sneak peek of what to expect from this week's, or I'm sorry, not even this week, week 10's final exam, so that you can prepare yourself, not be overwhelmed, but again, being prepared is probably the best foot forward. Take your time now to make sure that you are mastering the different chapters, that you are submitting any work that you might still have outstanding, that you are taking advantage of extra credit, and then you are putting yourself into a really good space to truly exceed and succeed with this final exam. So just another reminder, mindset is everything. Planning is so helpful. Remember, you can do anything you put your mind to, right? I think that probably in my first grade classroom, they probably had something like that on the wall, but it is so true. All you have to do is focus on it and put that energy into it, and you can finish this class fabulously. All right, you guys, well, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for attending the live events that we have had. This is actually the last live event. So we had live event 1, live event 2, and we had AM and PM options for both. So I hope that you've enjoyed this format. And again, please let me know if there's anything that I can help you with.